The forest was alive under the silver light of a full moon, each leaf trembling as though whispering secrets. Shadows stretched long between the ancient oaks, and the crisp night air carried a scent that made her pulse quicken. She moved silently, her senses sharp, every snap of a twig a warning and a call to attention. This was her sanctuary, the one place where no eyes could judge her and no whispers could wound her. But tonight there was a weight in the air, a presence that made her fur bristle along her arms. She paused, pressing her back against a gnarled tree, nostrils flaring. There, a shadow moved, fluid, dominant, yet deliberately unseen. The Alpha. He watched her. She could feel the magnetic pull of his gaze as keenly as if it were a physical touch. Her heart stuttered, not from fear alone, but from the impossible longing she had tried so hard to bury. She had promised herself never to let him see, never to let the truth slip, that he had always been hers, even if fate, or stubborn pride, forced her to pretend otherwise. Her legs tensed. She had to keep running, keep moving, or she would drown in the heat of his attention. And yet, a small, irrational part of her wanted to stop and look, to meet his eyes beneath the silver moonlight and surrender to the pull she could never name aloud. Legends whispered through the pack-like smoke through trees. A rejected mate could not escape destiny. She had always dismissed such stories, scoffing at the idea that one encounter, one touch, could bind a soul. Yet as the night wind teased her hair and carried the faintest echo of his scent, she wondered if the whispers had been right all along. A low growl rumbled through the darkness, not her own, and her chest tightened. The Alpha stepped from the shadows with the quiet, effortless authority that marked him as ruler. Every muscle in his body spoke danger, dominance, and, though she would never admit it, possessiveness. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, his voice calm, measured, yet edged with a steel she could not ignore. "It isn't safe for one like you." Her throat tightened, words failing her. She wanted to deny everything, to pretend she did not feel the ache in her chest, the tremor in her limbs. But the truth was stubborn, creeping into every fiber of her being. She wanted him. She always had. But this was only the beginning. The night stretched before them, heavy with tension, and she knew that once the moon had witnessed this encounter, nothing could be the same again. The air between them vibrated with an unspoken promise, a collision of wills and hearts that neither time nor pride could forestall. As he stepped back, melting into the shadowy tree line, her pulse raced and her breath came shallow. She knew one thing with absolute certainty. The chase had only just begun, and somewhere deep in the forest, destiny waited. Her chest still burned from the night in the forest, the memory of his gaze haunting every step she took through the village streets. Tonight was the Moonlight Festival, the annual celebration where the pack gathered beneath the lantern. Lit sky, a night of music, dancing, and whispered glances. But for her, the festival held no joy, only the sting of what she could not say and the weight of what she must hide. The lanterns flickered in rhythm with her racing heartbeat as she approached the clearing. The pack was already assembled, laughter and low growls mingling as the moon rose high, and there he was, her Alpha. Standing tall, his presence commanding the space around him as effortlessly as the moon commanded the night. He hadn't seen her yet, and part of her wanted to vanish into the shadows, disappear before the inevitable hurt arrived. But it was too late. Her secret had never been safe, and tonight it would be revealed in a way she hadn't anticipated. As she stepped into the light, the air seemed to shift, eyes following her every movement. And then he turned, sharp gaze landing on her. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his tone measured, almost cold. The words cut deeper than any physical blow. "I thought you knew your place." The pack stilled, sensing the tension. Whispers rose like wind through dry leaves. Her cheeks burned, humiliation curling in her stomach. She had hoped he would see past her pretense, would sense the truth she had spent years burying. Instead, he rejected her in front of everyone. She clenched her fists, forcing a tight-lipped smile. She began, but he cut her off, stepping closer, eyes locked on hers. "I said no, and no means no, don't push." The words echoed in her mind long after she had fled to the edge of the clearing, retreating into the night where no one could see her trembling. Her soul ached, not from fear, but from desire denied, from a bond that had been forged long before either of them could name it. Yet even in rejection, she could not help noticing the flicker behind his eyes, the hesitation, the tension that betrayed what he refused to admit. A shiver of hope ran through her, cruel in its timing. Perhaps, despite the public dismissal, he felt it too, the pull that refused to be denied. She pressed her back against a tree, moonlight catching the edge of her tears. "I will hide," she whispered to herself, voice trembling. "I will hide until he cannot ignore me, or until fate drags us together whether I want it or not." And somewhere in the crowd, he watched her retreat, jaw tight, nostrils flaring, hands clenching at his sides. Though he refused to act, the alpha's instincts whispered a dangerous truth. Rejecting her had awakened something in him he could not control. Tonight, the festival would continue with laughter, music, and celebration. But for the two of them, it was only the beginning of a game neither could fully understand, a slow, inexorable pull toward a destiny neither was ready to face. Her chest still ached from the sting of public rejection, but there was no time to dwell. The forest around the pack's territory was alive with whispers, not just of the wind through the trees, but of the pack itself. Eyes followed her from every shadowed corner, tongues wagging behind hands, and every glance carried suspicion. Even as she walked past familiar faces, she sensed it, the subtle shift in their demeanor, the questions they dared not ask aloud. Loyalty, she had learned, was a fragile thing in a pack governed by power and tradition. One misstep, one misjudged glance, and rumors could twist like thorned vines around your reputation. She kept her head low, forcing a calm smile as she passed the common gathering areas, but her thoughts were in chaos. Do they know? The question clawed at her relentlessly. Do they know what I am, that I am? Not like them, and yet none of it mattered as much as him, the Alpha. His presence lingered like a shadow at the edge of her vision, a constant reminder that no matter how carefully she concealed herself, he could always see through her. She had trained herself to hide her feelings, to appear indifferent, but the ache in her chest betrayed every careful mask she wore. Rumors, she realized with a grim twist of her stomach, were already spreading. Whispers of her loyalty, of her secrets of something different. She caught snippets of conversations. She's hiding something. I wouldn't trust her if I were you. Each word landed like a stone in her stomach, heavier than any wound she could receive from claws or teeth. And there were alliances forming, quiet, subtle, but dangerous. Some pack members eyed her with curiosity, others with thinly veiled hostility. She didn't know whom to trust anymore. Every smile felt like a threat, every compliment like a trap. Even the ones she once counted as friends now seemed to measure her against invisible rules she couldn't see. A rustle behind her made her spin, heart racing, only to find a younger wolf. Why? Died and nervous. "Mistress, are you all right?" he asked, voice barely audible. The small gesture of concern was almost laughable, a reminder that fear governed the pack as much as loyalty did. She forced a smile, smoothing the tension from her shoulders. "I'm fine," she said, voice firm, though the lie tasted bitter. "We all have shadows to navigate in this pack." Her thoughts drifted, unbidden, to the Alpha's eyes, the way they had lingered on her despite the public dismissal, the way he seemed to sense the storm inside her. That alone was dangerous. He could see her for what she truly was, and if the pack discovered even a fraction of her secret, chaos would follow. The night stretched on, moonlight filtering through the branches, casting silver patterns on the forest floor. She moved with careful steps, each one deliberate, each one measured, knowing that survival now depended on more than just strength. It depended on cunning, subtlety, and the ability to play a game that was far older than she could imagine. And as the shadows of the pack shifted around her, she realized with cold certainty she was alone, but the Alpha. He was always there, watching, waiting, and the pull between them continued to grow, silent yet impossible to deny. The wind carried a whisper, and for a fleeting moment she thought she heard it clearly. Destiny cannot be denied. The forest had grown quiet, almost unnaturally so, as if even the night itself held its breath. She walked along the edge of the clearing, the moonlight spilling through the branches and illuminating the wrist she had so carefully hidden. It was there, an intricate mark, faint but undeniable, that pulsed like a heartbeat beneath her skin. She froze, tracing it with trembling fingers. She had never seen it before tonight. A bond, a warning, or something far more dangerous. The symbol seemed to glow faintly, as if responding to the pull she had felt from him. The Alpha, her rejected mate, whose presence had lingered in her mind and body with unbearable intensity. Her chest tightened. She had spent years pretending, hiding the truth even from herself, but the mark could not lie. It was hers, and it was his, a connection neither could escape. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee from a fate she had spent years trying to avoid. And yet, part of her ached to understand it, to touch it, to let it consume her. The memories of the festival, of his rejection, flashed across her mind. His cold dismissal, his measured words, "I thought you knew your place," echoed in her skull. And now, with this mark burning against her skin, she wondered if rejecting him had been a mistake she could never undo. Fate has a way of finding us, even when we run. A low, familiar voice murmured from the shadows. Her head jerked up. He was there, stepping silently from the darkness, eyes fixed on the glowing mark. His presence was overwhelming, magnetic, yet carefully controlled. She wanted to hide, to deny everything, but the truth pulsed beneath her skin like a drumbeat. "You," she began, voice trembling, but he silenced her with a tilt of his head, the shadow of a smile brushing his lips. "I see it now, the mark, the bond I should have noticed before." Her heart stuttered. His words, gentle yet edged with authority, wrapped around her like chains. "He sees me, he knows." The realization was thrilling, terrifying, and impossibly intimate all at once. I didn't want you to see it," she whispered, fear and longing twisting together. "I thought I could protect myself, protect you." He stepped closer, eyes never leaving hers. "You don't protect yourself by hiding," he said softly, voice low, resonant. "You protect yourself by embracing what you are, and what we are." Every nerve in her body ached with tension. Desire, fear, and anticipation coiled together, tightening with every heartbeat. She wanted to resist, to push him away, but the mark burned like fire under her skin. It demanded recognition, acceptance, and connection. He reached out, brushing a fingertip against the curve of her wrist. A shock ran through her, light and electric, as if the universe itself had acknowledged their bond. For the first time, she understood what the legends had meant. The bond between a mate was not only emotional, it was physical, spiritual, and inevitable. Her breath caught, and even as she tried to retreat, the pull between them tightened, inexorable. Destiny had made its move, and there was no escape. The forest seemed to lean closer, the moonlight brighter, the night alive with the quiet hum of magic and fate. Somewhere deep in the shadows, the world shifted, and she realized that nothing, not rejection, not fear, not secrecy, could undo what had already begun. The Alpha's eyes burned into hers, and she knew the slow, burning pull that had haunted her for years was no longer subtle. It was here, and it would not be denied. The pack's clearing was alive with movement, laughter, and the low hum of conversation, but she felt as if she existed in a world apart. Every step she took was measured, careful, as though the slightest misstep would reveal her secret, the hidden mark that bound her to him. And yet, despite her attempts to remain invisible, she could feel him, the Alpha, watching her, a presence that drew her in like a gravity she could not resist. Across the firelit gathering, his eyes found hers. The connection was electric, subtle but undeniable. In the glow of the lanterns, every glance between them carried weight, desire, frustration, and the unspoken recognition of the bond neither dared to name aloud. She clenched her jaw, forcing herself to look away, but the pull was relentless. He stepped closer to a group of his loyalists, but his gaze never wavered from her. Every subtle movement, the curl of his lips, the flicker of his nostrils, the tilt of his head, spoke of a tension he refused to release. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and she could feel her pulse in her throat. She was caught in a dangerous dance, a silent war of glances and withheld words, where each look was a confession neither could risk speaking. "Why do you linger at the edges?" A voice whispered beside her. One of the younger wolves, curious but cautious, tilted his head. She forced a smile, brushing off the question. "I like to watch the celebrations from a distance. Quiet is safer," but it wasn't quiet, not really. Her thoughts were a storm of forbidden longing. Each time his gaze met hers, the world narrowed and everything else, the pack, the whispers, the fear, slipped to the periphery. She had spent years denying this pull, pretending that her heart was untethered, but now she felt it with every fiber of her being, a magnetism she could not fight. He moved through the crowd, brushing past others with effortless dominance, yet his eyes never left her. She caught the subtle shift in his stance when a rival approached, a wolf whose presence seemed to unsettle even him. His protective instincts flared, barely contained, and she felt it like a heat spreading through her chest. He wanted to guard her, and yet he restrained himself, playing the part of the indifferent alpha. Her breath caught as their eyes locked once more. A single flicker of emotion passed between them, desire, acknowledgement, the quiet echo of a bond long denied. And then he turned just slightly, allowing her to catch the barest hint of his lips, curving into something almost like a smile. Every glance, every fleeting moment, was a dangerous game. She knew it. The pack would notice, his rivals would notice, and yet she could not look away. Her heart ached with the knowledge that their attraction was forbidden, fraught with peril, yet irresistible. The night deepened, shadows stretching longer beneath the lantern glow. She tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, pretending to focus on the festivities, but she could feel his gaze lingering, intense and unwavering. The unspoken tension was palpable, an invisible thread pulling them together even as the world tried to keep them apart. Somewhere deep in the crowd, he moved closer, and she sensed it, the slow, inevitable collision of their desires. And in that moment, she knew that hiding, denying, or running would no longer protect her heart. The pull between them was too strong, and the forbidden attraction would demand acknowledgement sooner or later. The night had settled into a tense quiet, but the air itself seemed charged with unspoken truths. She moved cautiously through the trees surrounding the pack's territory, senses alert. Ever since the festival, whispers had followed her, subtle yet persistent. Something was stirring, a shift in the wind, a change in the pack, and a sense that her carefully guarded secrets were no longer safe. He appeared without warning, silent as a shadow, stepping from the darkness with that same calm, commanding presence that had haunted her dreams and waking thoughts alike. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, bore into hers. "You've been hiding more than your feelings," he said, voice low, almost a growl. Her stomach tightened. She started, but he cut her off with a shake of his head. "Don't lie, I can feel it, the power you try to bury. It's extraordinary." Her fingers brushed the hidden mark on her wrist instinctively, heat spreading beneath her skin. She had thought it her secret, something no one could touch, no one could understand. Yet here he was, seeing it anyway, feeling it, knowing it in ways no one else could. Fear mingled with something else, a thrill she could not name. "You're not just any wolf." He continued, stepping closer, the forest shadows dancing across his face, "and hiding it from me, from everyone, only puts you in danger." Her chest tightened, breath hitching. She had wanted to protect herself, to remain unnoticed, to keep her hidden strength secret. But the alpha, with a glance and a single word, had undone years of careful concealment. Her heart pounded with both exhilaration and terror. Why now?" she whispered, voice barely audible. "Why do you care?" He crouched slightly, tilting his head. "Because I should have seen it before. Because rejecting you was a mistake I cannot undo." The words were deliberate, measured, yet carried the weight of unspoken desire, of acknowledgement of the bond they shared. She shook her head, frustration and longing colliding. "You don't understand. If the pack finds out, if anyone finds out, they'll use it against me, against us." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The contact was electric, subtle yet impossible to ignore. "Then we protect it together," he said, voice soft but unwavering. You don't have to hide from me, or from yourself. I'll face whatever comes, as long as you trust me. Trust. The word lingered between them, heavy and dangerous. She had spent years keeping him at a distance, pretending that rejection and pride could shield her heart. But now, standing under the moonlight, feeling the heat of his presence, she realized that some truths could not remain buried. Some bonds could not be denied, no matter how carefully one pretended. And yet, even as a flicker of relief warmed her, the shadows around the pack shifted. Eyes watched, whispers murmured, and unseen hands moved with intent. The rival she had suspected, someone who would exploit her secret, was close, waiting for the moment to strike. She felt the tension coil tighter around her chest. The alpha noticed immediately, the protective flicker in his gaze sharpening into an edge she had never seen before. "Stay close," he commanded, his voice a low rumble that carried authority beyond words. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Her pulse raced not just from fear, but from the undeniable truth she could no longer ignore. Her secret was out, her bond could no longer be hidden, and the alpha, her rejected mate, was determined to claim what had always belonged to him. The night seemed to hold its breath, the forest waiting, as if acknowledging the storm that had begun, and deep in her chest she felt it, the pull of destiny, fierce and unstoppable, drawing her closer to the one she had always been bound to, whether she wanted it or not. The night air carried a tension she could almost taste, thick and metallic, like the warning before a storm. She had begun to understand the depth of her bond with him, the slow, burning pull that neither distance nor pride could extinguish. But the pack had its own rules, and shadows moved where she could not see. He was there before she even realized it, standing near the edge of the clearing, eyes narrowing. Something, or someone, was approaching, and every instinct screamed danger. Then he appeared, the rival alpha, tall, imposing, with eyes like cold steel and a confidence that radiated dominance. He moved through the gathering as if the world itself bent to his will, and the moment he spotted her, there was no mistaking the intent in his gaze. "She's remarkable," the rival said, his voice smooth, almost taunting as he stepped closer. "I've never seen anyone like her. Such potential." Her chest tightened. This was no casual admirer. This was a predator who saw opportunity, someone willing to exploit her, to use her secret against her and the alpha who had claimed her heart, even if neither of them had spoken it aloud. The alpha's presence shifted beside her, a coiled storm of controlled power. His jaw tightened, nostrils flaring, muscles tensing. Protective instincts flared in a low, dangerous growl. "Stay back," he warned, his voice carrying over the whispers of the pack. "She is mine, don't test me." The rival smiled, just a flicker, but it carried challenge and amusement. "Is that so?" he said, circling slowly. "I've seen the way she looks at you. Perhaps she belongs elsewhere." Heat rose to her cheeks, not from shame, but from the tension crackling in the air. Every glance, every breath between her and the alpha became a declaration unspoken, each charged with longing, desire, and the need for protection. The pack watched, holding their breath, sensing that the balance of power was shifting in ways that could not be ignored. "I don't belong anywhere but here," she said finally, voice steady, though her heart pounded like a drum, "and I belong with him." The rival's eyes narrowed, and she felt the weight of his gaze, measuring, testing. "Bold," he said, "we shall see if you can hold to your words when the time comes." The alpha's hand brushed hers instinctively, subtle but possessive, and the small gesture sent a shiver down her spine. Every nerve in her body hummed with awareness, danger, desire, and the unspoken bond that drew them together. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, a promise and a warning all at once. The rival lingered a moment longer, eyes flicking between them like a predator sizing up its prey, then turned, disappearing into the shadows. But the threat remained, lingering like smoke in the air, a promise that this was far from over. She exhaled slowly, leaning slightly into the alpha, sensing his tension easing just slightly at her presence. Yet she knew the truth. The rival would not give up, and neither would the darkness he carried. The forest seemed to close in around them, the moonlight casting long shadows across the clearing. And in that space between danger and desire, between rivalry and undeniable attraction, she understood something with chilling clarity. Her life, her heart, and her very destiny were now bound to him, whether she welcomed it or not. And the storm had only just begun. The forest was eerily silent, the usual chorus of night creatures absent, as if they too sensed the tension coiling through the pack. She moved cautiously, every sense alert, aware of eyes, hidden, watching, waiting. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears, a drumbeat of fear she could not quiet. It began with a whisper, a subtle shift in the wind, the faintest brush of movement across the trees. Her instincts screamed danger, and before she could react, the rival emerged from the shadows, flanked by wolves whose loyalty she did not recognize or dare trust. "Did you really think you could hide from me?" The rival hissed, voice smooth but laced with menace. "Or that your precious alpha could protect you forever?" She stumbled back, hand reaching instinctively for the mark on her wrist, but it was useless against the immediate threat. Panic clawed at her chest, but before fear could fully take hold, he appeared, silent, powerful, impossibly commanding. The alpha, her rejected mate, her bond, her destiny, was there, and every fiber of his being screamed for action. "Stay behind me," he growled, low and dangerous, eyes blazing with the storm of possession and protection. Every pack instinct coiled, ready to strike, and the forest seemed to respond to his presence, shadows bending to his will. The rival laughed softly, a sound that made her blood chill. Ah, the protective mate, how predictable. He lunged, testing, teasing, but the alpha was faster, intercepting with a flash of teeth and muscle, fangs glinting in the silver moonlight. The clash of dominance, the growl of primal power, resonated through the clearing. She wanted to run, to hide, but something deeper held her in place. The bond thrummed beneath her skin, and instinctively she found her courage. She could not escape this night, could not abandon him or herself. Her powers, hidden for so long, rose to the surface, a surge of energy that left the rival startled, a gasp escaping his lips. The alpha's gaze found hers for the briefest moment, commanding, protective, and filled with unspoken need. "Do you feel it?" he asked, voice rough with intensity. "This is our bond. They cannot break it." Her pulse raced, power and fear intertwining. She nodded, and together their energy surged outward in a wave, forcing the rival and his wolves to retreat, snarling in frustration. But retreat was only temporary. She could sense it. The rival would return, hungrier, more cunning, more dangerous. When the forest finally settled, the alpha stepped close, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His eyes were unreadable, a storm barely contained, but there was something beneath the control, a flicker of tenderness, a promise that he would not let anything, or anyone, harm her. "You're mine," he said softly, almost a whisper, but the words carried a weight heavier than any threat. "And I will protect you, always." Her chest tightened at the confession, and for a fleeting moment she let herself imagine a world where rejection, danger, and fear did not exist, only them, bound together by the bond no one could deny. But the shadows had not disappeared. Somewhere the rival waited, plotting, watching, and she knew with bitter clarity the battle for her heart and for her life was far from over. The moon hung high, silver and unforgiving, and in its light she realized that betrayal had drawn a line in the forest floor. On one side was fear, danger, and uncertainty. On the other was desire, trust, and a bond that neither time nor pride could break. And the night held its breath, waiting for the next move. The clearing was bathed in moonlight, silver and sharp, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The pack had gathered in tense silence, the air electric with anticipation. Tonight, power, loyalty, and love would be tested, not just by claws and fangs, but by the invisible bond that connected two souls in ways no one else could comprehend. He stood at the center, shoulders squared, muscles coiled, eyes blazing with determination. The alpha, her alpha, was no longer the distant, cold figure who had rejected her months ago. He was fire and storm, predator and protector, and he would stop at nothing to claim what had always been his. From the shadows, the rival emerged, flanked by a contingent of wolves loyal to him, their growls low and threatening. "So this is the one you claim." The rival sneered, eyes flicking to her with greed and challenge. "The bond between you, I'll see it broken." Her pulse raced, a mixture of fear, anticipation, and something far deeper desire. The bond beneath her skin throbbed, alive, connecting her to him in ways she had only just begun to understand. She did not need words to know he felt it too, his energy tangling with hers in an invisible storm. "You underestimate her, and you underestimate me," he growled, voice low, controlled, yet filled with raw power. "Leave or face the consequences." The rival laughed, sharp and cruel. "Consequences? You mean defeat." Time seemed to stretch as the two alphas circled each other, a dance of dominance and challenge. The pack held its breath, sensing the tension crackling between them, and then, in an instant, the clash came, a flurry of motion, teeth flashing, fangs bared, muscles striking with precise, lethal intent. She wanted to scream, to run, to intervene, but the bond pulsed beneath her skin, and instinct took over. She reached out, drawing on the energy she had spent years hiding. A surge of power radiated from her, subtle yet undeniable, and the rival faltered, startled by the force he could neither understand nor control. Her alpha's eyes found hers in that instant, and a wordless communication passed between them, together. They moved in perfect synchrony, instinct and heart aligned. Every strike he delivered, every defensive maneuver, was amplified by the rhythm of their connection. The bond, unbroken by time or rejection, became a weapon, a shield, and a promise. The rival growled, sensing the shift, but the tide had turned. With a final, decisive movement, the alpha pinned him, dominance and control radiating from every line of his body. The rival's wolves faltered, loyalty broken by the force of authority, and retreat became the only option. Breathing hard, he turned to her, eyes dark and stormy, yet softened by the depth of his feeling. He stepped close, the heat of his body radiating against hers. "You are mine," he whispered, voice low and intimate, and nothing. No rival, no danger, no lie, will ever change that. Her hands trembled as she reached up to touch his face, fingertips brushing against the sharp line of his jaw. The bond thrummed beneath her skin, a pulse of life, power, and love intertwined. I belong to you." She breathed, the words more than confession. They were truth, destiny, and surrender all at once. The pack exhaled as one, tension dissolving, the forest returning to its natural rhythm. But even as they held each other, bathed in moonlight, she knew this night had changed everything. The rival had been defeated, but the stakes had only grown higher. Their bond was undeniable, unbreakable, and as dangerous as it was beautiful. And beneath the silver glow, with the night stretching infinite around them, they finally understood. The slow burn, the rejection, the trials, all of it had led to this moment. Together, they were unstoppable, bound by destiny, desire, and an unbreakable connection that no force could sever. The forest was calm now, bathed in silver moonlight, the echoes of the previous night's chaos fading like mist. The pack moved through the clearing with quiet purpose, tension replaced by a sense of awe and respect. But for her, the world had shifted irrevocably. Every shadow, every whisper, every glance carried a new meaning, because now nothing could separate her from him. He stood before her, tall and commanding, yet softened by the tenderness in his gaze. His hand reached for hers, and when their fingers intertwined, the energy between them pulsed like a heartbeat, a rhythm only they could feel. The bond, once hidden, once denied, was now alive and undeniable. "You're mine," he said again, but this time it was not a warning. It was a promise, a truth carved into the very fibers of their souls, and I will never let anything, anyone, come between us. Her chest ached with emotion, a mix of relief, longing, and the fierce joy of finally being seen. She pressed her forehead against his, letting the warmth of his presence wash over her. "And I'm yours," she whispered, "always." The pack watched silently, some with understanding, others with quiet envy, but none dared interrupt the moment. The air around them shimmered with the power of their connection, a bond forged not just by attraction, but by destiny itself. The mark on her wrist glowed softly in response, a tangible reminder of the magic that had bound them long before either could admit it. He pulled her closer, lips brushing her temple in a gesture both protective and intimate. "No more hiding," he murmured, "no more fear. We face everything together." She nodded, letting herself finally breathe, letting herself surrender to the truth that had always been hers. Rejection, fear, and secrecy melted away, leaving only trust, love, and the certainty that they were meant to be. The moon climbed higher, casting silver light across the clearing as they walked side by side, hands intertwined, hearts aligned. The whispers of the forest seemed to celebrate with them, leaves rustling softly like applause, the night alive with quiet approval. Even the shadows no longer seemed threatening. They were part of their world now, part of the journey that had brought them to this moment. The rival's threat had been vanquished, the pack's whispers turned to respect, and the bond that had haunted her heart for years was now a living, breathing truth she could finally embrace. As the first rays of dawn began to touch the horizon, she glanced up at him, a smile playing at her lips. "So, this is how it feels," she said softly, "to finally belong." He cupped her face, eyes burning with a mix of desire and devotion. "Yes," he said, voice steady, filled with certainty. "You belong to me, and I to you, forever." Under the silver glow of the moon, with the pack surrounding them and the forest alive with quiet magic, they took their first steps into a future bound by love, trust, and destiny. Their souls had always known it, even when words failed, even when pride and fear had kept them apart. And now nothing could undo it, nothing could threaten it. They were together, bonded by fate, and the night itself seemed to bend in acknowledgement of a love that had finally found its home.